as you know from touring with me, I've been investigating. One of the things I've been investigating is, what is it that makes life worthwhile? I talked to a philosopher this week on my podcast who has written a couple of books on a stream of analytic philosophy that's been debating whether or not, if you weighed up the evidence en masse, whether existence itself is a net good or a net evil, with whatever implications you might want to draw from that argument for its creator, right? So I'm not trying to make a theological case, but part of this inquiry is like, if there was a God, is it more logical to conceive of him as good or as evil? And underneath that is a sense that the proper axis of evaluation for such a question is whether there's more pain and misery in the world or pleasure. And my sense is that that's the fact that that's how the argument is constituted is actually an indication of the pathology of our culture, because it's a fool's game to map pleasure and pain onto good and evil, partly because there are evil pleasures and there are morally justifiable pains, right? So whatever the landscape, whatever the moral landscape is, it's not reducible to the hedonic landscape and any axiomatic assumption that it is. Okay, so there's a corollary to that. And one of the corollaries would be, well, if we're not built to maximize pleasure and minimize pain, let's say, which is a powerful argument because emotions are powerful and the positive and negative emotion systems are powerful motivating systems. But if we're not built to maximize pleasure and minimize pain, then what's the cardinal call to existence? And my sense is that it's something akin to adventure. Maybe it's romantic adventure, which is an even better formulation. All right, so then let's say if that's the case, and you and I talked about this the last time we talked about the truth as part of the call to adventure.
The heroic adventure, yes.
Exactly. Well, so then if that's the case and the cardinal motivation in life is something like the heroic call to adventure, then you might ask yourself, well, what if that's not being pursued? What beckons as an ersatz alternative? And like certainly protest in the name of a ideology,
the name of a cause is a very
adventure.
It's very tempting. It's very tempting. I mean, I would say that in general, the purpose, finding purpose in a higher cause is, of course, one of the most useful ways to find a meaning in your life beyond the maximization of pleasure. Unfortunately, the rebellious attitude for the sake of rebellion becomes extremely appealing. Another of the students at Columbia, I'm sorry to hark on about it, but it does show a rot somewhere, at elite institutions. One of the other students at Columbia said that started the year out as a protest in October against the climate emergency, the climate crisis. And, within a month, it was Hamas.
So one of the things I noticed, I suppose it was in about 2014, which was approximately when I was starting to detect that something had gone seriously wrong with the universities, let's say. One of the things I did recognize amongst my colleagues was this axiomatic presumption that part of what the universities were there for was to teach young people how to be moral by protesting. That protest itself had become a stand-in for morality. And so, you can feel some sympathy for that kid that you were describing. I mean, he's gone off to an elite institution hoping to be taught how to live a good life in the classic sense by the world's most profound experts. And what he found when he got there was that since the 1960s, the best thing that the universities have to offer to their students is the false reputation, the false claim to morality that can be had, and the excitement that can be had by engaging in a protest. And
yes, the life of an activist is the ideal life, and the life that's rewarded and the life that is seen to be virtuous. I mean, it's all of that. And by the way, one of the other things that has struck me very much in recent times has been the fact that, of course, a lot of the problems that we see emerging in our societies in the West come about not just from that boredom, but of course the fact that when the financial tide goes out and stops being able to lift people up, a lot of other stuff gets revealed. We see this in the UK at the moment. It's not by any means the only explanation for the riots that have been going on. But if you look at all of the northern towns in which the riots have been going on, the material well-being of the population has declined in the last 13 years since the last set of riots. And, you sort of think, well, if the society isn't working for you financially, and joblessness has actually gone up, and on top of that you have challenges to your identity, well, of course there's a cause right there, and not an ignoble one. If it's about saying, I want to defend my culture and all of that, ignoble once somebody thinks that the best way of doing that is to pick up a brick and throw it at a policeman or at a place of worship.
Yeah, well, it's no simple matter to distinguish the genuine protests from the false protests, that's for sure. And so let me ask you one more question about your tour and your talk, and then maybe we'll turn our attention to the situation in the UK. Okay, so you're planning on showing your audiences footage from your journeys through the Middle East for the last 6 months. So I guess I'm curious about, well, you didn't step into the conflict in the Middle East as a naive observer, either of people or of societies. But my suspicions are that you've seen a lot more in the last 6 months than you ever really wanted to see. And so I'm curious about what you've seen and what you've concluded from that, and how it's altered or extended your viewpoint, or challenged it for that matter. Like, you've been poking your nose into very dangerous places. And so what's been the consequence for you, and what is it that you're hoping to shed a light on with the imagery in particular, let's say? What are you hoping to shed a light on for the people who are going to come and hear you talk?
Well, there's quite a lot of things. I mean, I've covered a lot of conflicts before, including in the Middle East, and a lot of what has been happening is sadly familiar territory to me. There are though, as you and I have discussed before, there's a reason why hell is a pit that's endless, and when it comes to violence and the ability to commit acts of evil, it seems to me that that axiom that the pit is just endless has really been shown in the last year. I've been in Israel and Gaza most of the time since the 7th, and yes, I mean, of course, like anyone reporting from the front line, seen lots of things that I'd rather not have seen. But I mean, my belief is that there's a very important role in society for people who do that and come back and tell everyone else what it's like. Not least, of course, to warn people. I mean, there's lots of things that, I've seen as a reporter and as a reporter from war zones, which I know I would not want other people to see. I know I didn't want to see myself. But in order for other people not to see that, you have to know where people can go. And, I mean, like, one of the things that has struck me a lot in the last year has been that and I've made this comment a couple of times in pieces and elsewhere, that the terrorists of the 7th in particular were deeply gleeful whilst carrying out acts of unbelievable barbarism. And that's something that's something I've been thinking about a lot, because to be doing something you think is right but is evil is one thing. To be doing something that is evil and being joyful about it is and for people around you to celebrate it. And then at several degrees of remove, that people who think they've got the same cause as you would excuse it, or, say, well, context, or, much like all sorts of things like that are just alarming. And I've often thought, actually, in recent months, there was a late a historian and writer called Gita Sareni, who died about 20 years ago, made a great impact on me when I was growing up. She wrote, among other things, the biography of the child killer Mary Bell, and also the biographies of Stangl, the camp commandant at Treblinka, who she interviewed, and also of Albert Speer. I remember reading an interview with Gita Sareni towards the end of her life, and she was not a religious person, particularly, but she said, having spent a lot of her life considering evil and staring at evil and writing about evil, she said it feels like a force that descends. It just manifests, and there's no other explanation for it. It isn't just about some problem in the developmental process or simply a matter of education or opportunity. Is that on top of all those problems that do exist, sometimes there is an incarnation of evil in the world.
Are you tired of feeling sluggish, run down, or just not your best self? Take control of your health and vitality today with Balance of Nature. With Balance of Nature, there's never been a more convenient dietary supplement to ensure you get a wide variety of fruits and vegetables every day. Balance of Nature takes fruits and vegetables, they freeze dry them, turn them into a powder, and then they put them into a capsule. The capsules are completely void of additives, fillers, extracts, synthetics, pesticides, or added sugar. The only thing in Balance of Nature fruit and veggie capsules are fruits and veggies. Right now, you can order with promo code Jordan to get 35% off your first order, plus get a free bottle of fiber and spice. Experience Balance of Nature for yourself today. Go to balanceofnature.com and use promo code Jordan for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer, plus get a free bottle of fiber and spice. That's balanceofnature.com, promo code Jordan for 35% off your first preferred order, plus a free bottle of fiber and spice.
Well, in one way of thinking about that, I think, even technically, is that, because I've been thinking about this a lot in relationship to these new large language models, and there's a statistical probability that any given concept will be associated with any other given concept. And if your mapping is technologically advanced enough, you can calculate those statistical relationships. And that's what the large language models do. And then you can start to map mathematically what the psychoanalysts called complexes. And complexes are systems of ideas that occur in each other's proximity, and there's a core to them. And one of the ways of imagining the theological representations of evil, the legions of devils, let's say, that are behind the generation of the bottomless pit of hell, is that they are representations of complex of ideas that hang together. I think you put your finger on the core of it, actually. The core of it isn't evil. The core of it is gleeful evil. Mm. Right?
Yes,
so it's not merely the evil, and it's
rejoicing in evil.
Yeah, well, yeah. And that is actually the core of sadism from a psychopathological perspective, right? It's not, it's positive delight. It's a multidimensional characterization. It's positive delight in the unnecessary suffering of others, right? And the unnecessary element is also cardinal, because that plays up the element that's parody. So in Auschwitz, for example, one of the games the guards used to play was to have the prisoners who got off the train cars shivering and frozen and accompanied by their dead relatives who, died of asphyxiation or froze to death in the cattle cars. They'd arrive at the camps, and then they'd be compelled to carry wet sacks of salt from one side of the camp, which was the size of a town, to the other, and then back. And so it's a parody of work, right? And it's a demonstration to the person themselves that not only are they suffering for all the reasons that they're in the camps and by the fact of the burden that they're carrying, but the utter counterproductive pointlessness of the painful labor is also emphasized and insisted upon, and then delight taken in that. And that is a very dark thing to observe.
Yes, I mean, there's I was in the one of the maximum security prisons in Israel earlier this year and saw the Hamas terrorists from the 7th who had been captured alive. One of them was somebody who I recognized from one of the atrocity videos, who had there were two young boys, about 10 and 12. They were with their father. They went into the safe room when the bombs started falling, and the Hamas terrorists came and they saw them go and they threw a grenade, and the father threw himself on the grenade and was killed in front of his sons. And then, You know, one of them lost an ear and the other one lost an eye, and they were staggering around the main room of their house, weeping and wailing in the most unforgettable, awful way. And one of the terrorists came in, and who'd just killed their father in front of them, came in and opened the fridge and helped himself to the food. And the youngest of the boys, in total trauma, and said, "That's my mother's food." And the terrorist turned to him and said, "Where's your mother? I want her too." How could anyone do that?
Well, you put your finger on it. Well, that idea of the descent is like one of the things that God accuses Cain of when he becomes bitter is opening the door to evil. He said his suffering wasn't merely a consequence of his failure in life. It was a consequence of his failure tempting him to open the door to evil. And so if you think about it in terms of these complexes of associated ideas, there are ideas that if you let in, they bring a host of other ideas with them. And a host is exactly the right phrase. And you might be tempted in a moment of weakness to invite something in that you think that you can control or that you could bend to your own purposes. But the problem is that you're inviting in a complex that has been around forever, and that once lodged inside you might prove that whatever defenses that you might think you have there to mount are trivial in comparison to the power of what you've invited in. And that is, I think you can think of that technically, and it is a terrible thing. And it is the kind of things that are warned against at the theological level, although that's a very complicated thing to untangle. And so, all right, so let's turn from that a bit. So that's the sort of thing that you're going to explain as you're communicating with your audience. And what you're hoping to demonstrate to people is that is the logical conclusion of the sorts of games, for example, that are being played on the university campuses.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, well then, of course, the problem with that is, at least to some degree, is that complex of ideas that takes possession of people in the circumstances that you're describing has that end in mind.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.